Okay. What did he say?
Employee managing the endowment assets at UNC. Over the following 25 years, he's demonstrated success in managing investment programs for UNC and then for large family offices. In March of 2017, he was named co-chief investment officer of Willett Advisors, Michael Bloomberg's investment fund. Brad has been affiliated with the UNC Board of Trustees. A newcomer to politics, he won the Republican primary and the general election last November. Let's give a Kiwanian welcome to State Treasurer Brad Briner.
Thank you, Phil. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be with all you today. Tough to follow a video of golfing on a Friday afternoon, so I will do my best. I'll try to keep it interesting for you. My favorite part of these opportunities is to take questions, so I try to keep it short, and I promise to answer anything and everything you have, unless it's about the state of Carolina basketball, which I'm a little sad about. We haven't got there yet. We're still working on that. As Phil told you, I am a newcomer to politics, so I am learning every day. The most important thing I've learned is how critical it is to have a great team around you. I'm joined by my Chief of Staff, Eric Nesbitt, here today. Eric's the linchpin of all that, and so what successes we've had so far really start from Eric and the other members of our team who joined us recently. I started my North Carolina career in 1995. So I came here. I was supposed to be here 4 years. And as the story goes, I met a girl. And 30 years later, I still live in Chapel Hill. I've got 4 children. And I've been in the financial services industry my entire career. I spent the last 12 years before running for office commuting back and forth to New York 5 days a week. I had a pretty good job up there, but I had a family down here. And I love this state. And I walked into Mike Bloomberg's office one day at the end of 2021. And 2021 was a really good year. If you owned anything, it went up in value. It was fantastic. We should have more years like that. And I walked into his office and I said, Mike, we made you a lot of money this year. I'd like to go tell the team, congratulations. What do you have to say to them? What can I go tell everybody to get them excited about what we've done this year? And he looks at me and he says, what am I going to do with all that money? That was the moment I knew I was working for the wrong guy. And I thought about what I could do better with my skills in life. So why does this matter to me? Let me go way back and I'll tell you a little bit more about my career, a little bit more about what we're doing at the Treasurer's office and how I want to run that place. And then I'll take questions. So for me, it goes way back. I'm the youngest of 4 boys. My dad lost his job when I was 4 years old. And that was the late 70s. So many of you will remember that President Carter did not put us in a great place. It led to President Reagan, of course. I didn't understand any of that. I just understood my parents were fighting. And that was the first moment that I had any sense for what goes on in a family, what goes on economically and how it matters. Now, I didn't really articulate it to myself at 4. But as you go forward in life, you start to realize why you behave the way you do, what matters to you and why it matters to you. I saw up close and personal at that point in my life how important family economic security is for individual liberty and choices. And that's something that's always defined the way I think about things. We are a product of our choices, and we get to have those choices in part because we can afford to have those choices. And that is incredibly important to a family. Fast forward to the crash of '87, my dad got another job, but unfortunately that crash took his job again. I was old enough to understand exactly what was happening. And so for me, I've always been focused on the investment business, on the business of making money, in part because of the way I grew up. I think all of us have those kind of memories from our childhood that define even today who you are. And for me, that was economic insecurity. And so I've spent my entire professional career trying to get to economic security. And I've been very fortunate. I've been lucky to be in positions both at UNC, where we had $1 billion endowment, and it was the year 1999, and we were able to have successful results in managing that program, to 2006, where we started a multifamily office in Chapel Hill, and we're lucky enough to grow that from $1 billion the day we started to $12 billion in 18 months. To getting a phone call in 2011 from Mike Bloomberg, who was the mayor of New York at the time, and who'd done a global search looking for someone to run his assets, and he happened to call me. I took that call in part because you have to take a call from the mayor of New York City, but also because he was the perfect client. Extremely wealthy, but also distracted, so that we could actually do our job, making money for him, making investments for him, without the interference that usually goes on. I'm going to come back to that because it's an important point about how we think about managing the Department of State Treasurer. And so the opportunity to run for State Treasurer came up in 2023 for me. As I mentioned, by 2021, I was thinking about what was next for me, thinking about wanting to be home more often, thinking about where I could use my skills for a better purpose than they had been used. And I'd been involved with the Treasurer's Office. I'd been on the Debt Affordability Commission for over a decade. I knew the investment professionals. I'd followed the investment strategies, the ebbs and flows thereof over a bunch of years. And so the opportunity to run for treasurer was compelling to me. I quit my job on December 14th. I filed to run on December 15th, and then spent the next year and change securing the job, and I was lucky enough to get it. And so thank you to all of you for your support to the extent that that was part of it. I want to run the treasurer's office a little bit different. So when I got sworn in on January 1st, I dragged my kids to the office that afternoon. They still don't really appreciate it, but I needed to send an email to everybody. I wanted to set the tone early that we're going to do things a little bit differently. And I sent them two quotes, one from country music, the other from an inventor, but both headed in the same direction. The first is from Mary Chapin Carpenter. For country music fans, you'll know who that is. She says, "The stars might lie, but the numbers never do." That's how we run things in the treasurer's office. Don't really care about the stars so much, but I care deeply about the numbers. That's going to guide everything we do. It may lead us to some places that aren't particularly politically popular, but they are the right things to do, and they're grounded in data, and that is a commitment I have to you and to our state. The second, which is harder in state government, is Charles Kettering. And he says, if you've always done it that way, it's probably wrong. I had an idea this would be a challenge, but I guess I've learned just how big a challenge that is in changing behaviors. We stick to antiquated ways in a lot of cases because they work okay. They are not necessarily efficient. They certainly aren't modern technology, but they don't get anyone in trouble. And so I've got a commitment to our team and our people that it's okay to make mistakes. It's not what we seek to do, but if you're not trying to do new things, then you're not evolving, you're not getting more efficient, you're not serving our people better. It's easy to do more with more. The challenge is to do more with the same, or more with less over time. That is the central challenge as I see it for government, and one that we've kind of lost the thread on, certainly in Washington, D.C. I think Raleigh does a much better job of that, but we certainly can improve as well. And so with those two defining quotes, we were off to the races. There are three core values, as I think of them, that are logical for those in the business world that may be a little bit new to those in the government world. And one is topical, efficiency. How do we do more with less? Second is accountability. There's a lot of programs out there that are nebulous in their measurement. One of the important things to me in the way that I want to run the department, you'll see on the front page of our website today, and that's accountability. What are we actually trying to do? And how are we actually doing? This is not an exercise in giving everyone A's. I'll let my kids' school do that. It's an exercise in being very clear on our objectives for you, the taxpayers. We're not meeting all our objectives. That is not the goal, of course. We will probably never meet all our objectives because they're not going to be easy to meet. And again, that's a cultural change for a lot of the people in the Department of State Treasurer, but it's important to me as the leader thereof to set goals that are important to achieve. They're clear, concise, and directionally, hopefully we'll get to at some point. So go to the front page of our website, you'll see an accountability tab, and it lays those out. On the investment side, as an example, it's simple. We need to make 6.5%. We haven't been doing that. We haven't done that in a long time. For 20 plus years, the state pension plan has underperformed our goal of making 6.5% or 7% before. We used to do better. That's led to a series of challenges. I'll go into those in a second. The final core value for me is aligning incentives. It's the only thing I really learned in business school. It's a pretty expensive lesson, honestly, but it's such an important lesson that repeats itself every day in my job as we attack healthcare. And again, I'll come back to that. The alignment of incentives is a huge problem. As we think about what we're doing in the pension system, aligning incentives, again, a huge problem. And so that is always front of mind for me as we address some of the financial challenges that we have. But let me begin at a high level about the Treasurer's Office with great news. We are an extremely well-managed state financially. I think you all know that. Some of you get some credit for that. Over the last 15 years, there's been a sea change in the way that we manage the finances of this state. 15 years ago, we owed the federal government a couple $2 billion for unemployment insurance. We had about $10 billion of general obligation debt. Those numbers are 0 and 2.5 now. We've taken our general obligation debt as a state down 75% in 15 years. We've taken our tax rate down materially. You talk to people from New York and from other states like that, and they don't understand either of those things, that you can lower tax rates and you can pay off debt. That's left this state capable of responding to tragedies like Hurricane Helene. And we've done that. We've not done that as well as we want to, probably never can in such a devastated tragedy, respond quite to the degree that you want to, but we have the capability financially, and that's thanks to the legislature, that's thanks to the taxpayers, that's thanks to a number of you who've allowed us to be in that position. And so that is a great source of strength. We're one of 14 states in the country that are AAA. We just had Moody's and S&P again reaffirming that we are in really good shape. That said, they don't really look at the two biggest debts we owe, and those sit in the Treasurer's Office. We owe $16 billion to our former employees in the form of the pension system. We owe $36 billion in the form of the healthcare system. Combined, those are about 1.5 times our total state budget. They are enormous liabilities that we have many, many years to pay off. So it's not like they're due tomorrow, but we've got to have a strategy to make sure we're ahead of those. Those liabilities have only grown in the last decade. And so our central challenge in managing the Department of State Treasurer is to get those liabilities smaller over time. How are we going to do that? Let's talk about the investment side of the pension system. Our pension system is about 89% funded. That's good. That's top 15 in the country. The legislature has had a bipartisan long-term commitment to funding that system for us. In 83 of the last 84 years, they've met their required contribution. That is a record that is unparalleled. If you go to any other state, they have not had that kind of commitment to making sure that we pay our bills. So we're in good shape from the funding side. Some of you may be retirees from the either teachers or local employees system, or you certainly know people who are. And if you do, you'll know that we have not kept them up with inflation in many, many years. For the local plan, as an example, we haven't given a cost of living adjustment in a decade. Inflation over that period is 45%. So we may not have a contractual obligation to do that, but I certainly feel like we have a moral obligation to do that for the folks who've worked for the state and served us tirelessly. So our retirees are not benefiting tremendously from the pension system, and our legislature is funding the pension system. So then the question is obvious. What's happening? Why does this not all compute? And the answer is the investment side of what we do as a state. We fall short of the average state by 1.6% per year, every year on $127 billion. That's our challenge. How do we increase returns of our pension system just to be an average state pension system, not to be an endowment or a foundation or a family office or a high-risk investor, but a mid-risk and mid-return investor like we should be, so that we can honor the taxpayer and we can honor the retiree, because we're really not doing either right now. It's a tough message politically, if you think about it. I'm telling people we need to take more risk. Nobody likes to take more risk. That doesn't feel good. But there's risk in going too slow. I always tell the story of two of my daughters. I've got an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old now, both of whom learned to drive recently. The 18-year-old loved to go 85 miles an hour on the freeway. I think we all understand that's a problem. And when I tried to correct her, she decided to go 90 instead, which wasn't the right answer. The 16-year-old loved to go 45 on the freeway. Different problem, but equally challenging, equally risky in my opinion. It's no different in managing a portfolio. If you're going 45, inflation's going to pass you, and you're going to be in a hole that you probably can't get out of. If you're going 85, the potential to wreck is very high and is a bigger problem, honestly. How do we go 60? How do we go 65? That's the central challenge on the investment side. We have a governance model called the sole fiduciary model. And what that means, and it's a model that was put in place 150 years ago. All 50 states had it then, only 3 have it still. It means that within certain statutory limitations, I can do anything I want. The last Council of State meeting was April 1st, and because it was April 1st and I couldn't help myself, I decided to announce to everybody that we were going to start building rat farms in Raleigh. And at first, people didn't quite understand where I was going, but obviously it was April 1st, so I wanted to make a joke of it. The scary reality, though, is that as the sole fiduciary, I could do that. That's not best in class. That's not the best way to do it. The other 2 who do this, Connecticut and New York, each have a former treasurer or senior official who is in jail for the obvious reasons. We have had wonderful public servants in this role, so it's not to suggest we've ever had that problem here in North Carolina, but one more reason to go away from this model is to eliminate that possibility altogether. So we've got legislation that has passed the House Pensions Committee. We hope it passes the House next week. It is in the Senate budget bill. We've previewed it with the governor. It's enjoyed bipartisan support so far, but as anyone knows, you never know until it's over. That modernizes our governance with a goal of closing that 1.6% gap. I've spent 25 years building large investment programs. When you have moments like we have in the last couple weeks where you lose an extraordinary amount of money in a day, thankfully it's a small percentage for us, but it's still large dollars. If you're the sole fiduciary and you don't have the support system that we want to build around you, and you don't have the history of dealing with crises like the one that we started April 2nd, you make decisions that are not optimal. Thankfully, we didn't do that. Thankfully, we've stayed the course. Thankfully, we've recovered anything we've lost and then some. In fact, I think we've made money year to date in the pension system. But we need to put a governance architecture that's permanent, that ensures that makes best in class the reality for us. That's what we're doing on the pension side. It's pretty straightforward. We're just borrowing from Virginia, Florida, Texas, the 47 other states who've already done this. We're not inventing new technology. The health plan, on the other hand, we have to invent new technology. I think everybody understands that the American healthcare system is broken in innumerable ways. It kind of goes back to the simple statement I made about business school earlier, and that's the incentives are never aligned in the healthcare system. We're all solving for different things, and that local optimization never seems to get into a systematic optimization that's good for anyone. And so we've got to think differently. That is not without challenge. One of the assets that we have coming into that conversation is that the state health plan is in crisis. We have a $500 million deficit next year and a $1.4 billion deficit the next year. It may sound funny that I think a crisis is an asset, but it forces us to change. And we have to change. It's the Einstein quote, doing the same thing over and over again is the definition of insanity. And we've got to try something new in the healthcare system. We've got to try to align incentives. We are beginning down that road in certain ways. We've got good partners in doing so. We will not blame the providers for all of this. That has been a strategy that's historically been employed to really no avail. They are not without guilt, but so are many other actors in the healthcare system. So we've got a lot of wood to chop in trying to fix the state health plan. We've got a good partner in the legislature who's appropriated a lot of money There's only $500 million of total extra dollars available for next year's budget, and they've sent $225 million of those to the Treasurer's office. So we're really appreciative of the support that they've given us in trying to fix these endeavors. But we've got to make progress in the state health plan system. We have committed to raising premiums on state employees for the first time in 8 years. Again, not something that I wanted to do when I came into office, but it's the commitment to transparency that I have to you, the taxpayer, that drives us to do that. We had $1 billion of reserves 8 years ago. We have burned through all of that. We don't have the choice anymore. We've got to come up with revenue. We've asked the legislature for a bunch, and they've been able to give us some. But we're going to ask the state employees for some too. Again, not what we want to do, but what we have to do. And then we've got to change the cost trajectory. Our costs are going up 7%. Our revenues are going up 3%. For anyone who runs a business, you understand very clearly that that is a problem that is not sustainable. So that's our central challenge. Can we drive the cost trajectory down towards the revenue trajectory? We think we can. It's going to require some new innovation. It's going to require some different thinking, and it might require some hardball negotiations with certain people that we're in the middle of right now. But we have a commitment to trying to fix it. It's the right thing for the state employees, it's the right thing for our state, and it's the right thing for the taxpayers. And frankly, it's really interesting to see if we can fix such a broken system. There's a lot of other things going on at the Department of State Treasurer. One of them that's topical because it's April is really leaning into financial literacy. I don't think anyone in this room needs financial literacy lessons, but unfortunately you're in the 2% of the state who doesn't. The other 98 probably do, and we're committed to helping. We think that starting early, and particularly with leveraging off the high school program that already exists, is something that is absolutely on brand for the State Treasurer's Department, and something that we've spent the better part of April leaning into, including launching a newsletter around that you'll find on our website. So I've thrown a lot at you today. What I want to say is that this Department of State Treasurer is in good hands, and they're not my hands, they're all of our hands. We've added a lot of people in the last 4 months from a lot of different parts of state government who are attracted to the substantial challenges we face. I think we are making great progress. We are trying new things. Some of them will fail, and we'll be clear when they do. But that will lead us to a lot of success down the road. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions about anything. Mostly, I just thank you for what you do for our community. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your interest in this part of state government.
First of all, thank you very much for your willingness to run, to serve, and also for being here today. I remember years ago, the state pension plan had some very unusual assets, and if I remember correctly, it seemed like there was some timberland in Florida or alligator farms or whatever else. Can you speak to maybe some of the unusual assets that we own?
Unfortunately, we still own that timber. This month, well, it'll come out next week, the theme of our financial literacy newsletter is opportunity cost. And that timberland investment, which is from 2006, is the biggest opportunity cost in the history of the state pension system. We put in $1 billion, and it's probably worth $1 billion 20 years later. So we do have some esoteric assets. I mean, one of the ironies right now is that with interest rates where they are, making 6.5%, which is all we need to do, is easier than it's been in 20 years. When you worked at the Treasurer's office, Treasury rates were 7% plus. You could have a lot of Treasury bonds and not worry too much about making your 7%. You had a long period there where that wasn't true. And so many investors were searching for alternatives to find that 6.5 or 7%. And some of them were quite misguided. Certainly the timber was in hindsight. We'll look at some esoteric assets, but they need to have an underpinning that is contractual. I'll tell you one that we've looked at a high level and may or may not go through, but to give you a sense of how we're willing to think different, but also how we feel that these type of assets have a really solid underpinning, is you may have seen recently that the ports on the Panama Canal were sold or agreed to be sold. So we're looking at that transaction as an example. That is an asset that is unlikely to be replicated. It doesn't seem to me that anyone's going to dig a canal through Nicaragua or Panama again. So we feel like it is undisintermediatable. The rates of return are well in excess of our cost of capital if we can get that kind of transaction done. That one may not happen for a lot of political reasons, but those are the type of things that may be esoteric, but have a base return that is very hard to argue doesn't exceed our cost of capital. Sure. Yeah. Sure. I can repeat the question. Yeah. So crypto and digital assets come up all the time. There is a bill that also passed House Pensions around giving the treasurer the authority to invest, but not compelling us to invest in Bitcoin only. I've spent a lot of time on this topic, and I think about it a lot because I do get the question a fair amount. In the end, Bitcoin exists in the realm that gold exists in, that silver exists in, that diamonds exist in. They are worth something because they are worth something. That is not a very satisfying answer for most people. It's what can I do with it and what's the alternative use? But money is that way. Money is simply a promise, and that promise may or may not come true. We as Americans look at the dollar bill as an inviolate promise, but the rest of the world doesn't think of their currencies that way. Spend some time in Argentina and you'll know what I mean. So to me, Bitcoin is an alternative currency. It is a speculative asset. It is being used right now to bet against the US dollar. Given what's going on in Washington, D.C. generically, I won't comment specifically because we'll see where all that goes. We all know that it's unsustainable. We are printing way too many dollars. We are borrowing way too much money as a federal government. And so if one wants to bet against that, the preferred methods are gold and Bitcoin. We haven't wrapped our heads around whether that's an appropriate asset for a low-risk, low-return investor like the pension system. Frankly, there are alternatives we could use to get exposure to it today we are not taking advantage of. But it's a set of options that we welcome. So I don't think we're in a hurry to go put these into the pension system, but it is new technology that has a purpose, and that is creating a sound currency, which it's unclear the rest of the world has. Yeah. Sure. So the staff of the investment management division peaked at 45 investment professionals in December of 2016. In December of 2024, that was 15. And we manage a lot more money in-house now. We need to grow the internal staff so that we don't have to pay external people. There's a really good trade in there, in that we can bring in-house money that is managed for 75 or 0.75% of assets, and we can do it for 0.0075% of assets. So we will add to the team in part for internal management. We'll do that even further on the private equity side, where the fee structures are 2% and 20%. We can do that in-house at a fraction of that. And so you will see our internal team grow, and it will be at the expense of the external groups. The net expense ratio will come down over time as a result. The net internal expense will go up, though. All of it, I think, is a great decision for the taxpayers, but you will see that. We'll get to 25 or 30 people, is my guess. 100%, yes. Yeah, no, advice is, it's got to be worth what you're paying for it, of course. Yeah, we think that internal management is the best answer for a plan of our scale. At $130 billion, there's no deal that we couldn't do, and there's no investment syndicate that wouldn't want us as part of it. You need people who are capable of doing the analysis. You need lawyers who are capable of executing on a timely basis. And so there are some people we need to bring in-house. But net of what we're paying externally, this is going to be a really good thing for the pension system.
What effect has Trump's tariff
Yeah.
had on the state of North Carolina?
It depends on the day. It depends on the day. It seems to evolve daily. What I will tell you is, as of last night, we have made money this year. The S&P was down 8% as of last night. So we feel like we're in a good position on a relative basis. The reason for that is we own a lot of long duration bonds. We've added to that position throughout the year, which has been a good decision. We've bought some international equity as well. Where does it go from here? Your guess is as good as mine. To the extent that we can find assets that deliver 6.5%, 7%, 7.5% under every scenario, and we own many more than one of those, that's where we want to be. We don't, the taxpayers in North Carolina don't, shouldn't, particularly care whether we keep up with the stock market. You should care whether we make 6.5%. Because if we don't, that's coming back to you on a bill on your taxes. So the more we can become an absolute return investor and focused just on the returns that we need to make and less on the relative returns to the market, the better. That transition will take years. But it'll allow me to answer that question someday by saying, I don't really care. Unfortunately, I have to care a lot right now. And our guess is that this is a negotiation. We have taken active steps to get all of our assets out of China, mostly because they are suffering from the hangover of the largest property bubble in the history of mankind, but also because there's some other issues that potentially could come in play. And we have taken steps to make sure that we are more US focused generically because of the potential for a trade war, but that's at the margin.
Some people think we're headed for a recession. What's your take on that?
Probably, to be honest. The way that we get into recessions is economically essentially always the same, and that's that people stop making capital expenditure decisions. And then the ripple effects that occur from that over time lead to a recession. With uncertainty, the last thing you want to do is buy a new building or a new car or anything like that, so you postpone. And that's logical for you, that's logical for a company, but when everyone starts doing it, that's when the recession ultimately ends up being inevitable. At the moment, it certainly seems that that's what's going on. Everybody's sitting on their hands waiting to see what happens. So it's not a foregone conclusion. I think it's just a likely conclusion unless we get to some better level of certainty reasonably quickly. Sorry to ruin your lunch, that. Please don't let's end on that.
Here you go, Roger, right here.
I wanted to ask you, you mentioned how underfunded the state health plan is.
Yeah.
And you're sounds like you have some radical ideas about trying to get that caught up, because it's kind of depressing when you hear the numbers. Other than raising premiums for employees, what can be done?
Yeah, I'm going to take exception to the word radical, if you don't mind.
Okay.
I'm going to go with aggressive. Listen, in the end, and I'm an economics guy, I'm a business guy, and so I approach the healthcare conversation from that perspective always. How are we setting up situations where the patient wins, the provider wins, and the payer wins? Those are the only durable solutions. So the other thing you learn as you study this is that in many cases in healthcare, price and quality are inversely related. And the final ingredient I'll say that is really important to us is that volume matters tremendously in healthcare. And we control an enormous amount of volume. We also have extremely price-sensitive volume. We did a program where we made it free to see certain primary care providers. 40% of our members changed their primary care provider for $20. Give you a sense of how price sensitive they are. So you take that recipe and the design of having win-win-win, and there are ways to do this where essentially we are encouraging volume in exchange for price. We're encouraging our members based on lower copays. And we get better quality because what happens is the specialist in a certain procedure does more of that and they get more expert at it. There's a lot of cost that goes into procedures like that. where it's good for the provider to do more, so much of their cost is fixed. It's good for the patient because the quality is better, and it's good for the payer because the price is less. That's where we're starting. So you'll see us announce essentially competitions for that kind of business starting this summer. There's 44 of them that we're going to go through with that we think will save us a lot of money. And most importantly, will be better for the provider and the patient too, so it will be durable. Can't just tell people to charge less and hope that it works out. We got to give them a reason to charge less, and volume is the answer to that. Thank you.
Hold on one second. As y'all know, and I don't know if our speaker knows, we aren't able to pay our speakers. What we do is offer a meal. We don't pay in Bitcoin or cash. Well, we've got something else. We usually give lunch, and you didn't have anything but iced tea, so we didn't do too much on that. But we do give a book to a school library, and it goes to the schools that have a large number of lower socioeconomic. And are you able to sign your name? Or sure. If not, an X will be fine. But just you can go down there and and sign that. Thank you so much. And you think John Alexander has misbehaved today? You should have seen him some days. Now we have a very solemn duty of recognizing with the resolution. We have Charlie Sawyer who will present the resolution.
Anytime we do a memorial to a member that's passed, it is a solemn occasion, but it's difficult to be solemn when it comes to Bob Goodell with his stripy socks, his infectious smile, and going down the side of the Wells Fargo building at almost 90 years old. But let's focus on Bob as solemn as we can for a few minutes. Whereas Robert Selden Bob Goodell, son of Ralph Selden Goodell and Clara Zurcher Goodell, was born on December the 12th, 1933 in Marshalltown, Iowa, and died at age 90 on July 24th, 2024 in Raleigh, North Carolina. And whereas Robert Selden Goodell earned a BS degree at Iowa State University, served in the U.S. Army, and earned an MBA degree at the University of Kansas. He had an illustrious career, including serving as CEO of Harris Teeter and Deputy Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Commerce. And whereas Robert Selden Goodell was a member of the Order of the Longleaf Pine, the Order of the Hornet, and received many other honors for his dedication to a life of service to his state and community. He served on numerous nonprofit boards, including the Alcohol Drug Council of North Carolina, Healing Transitions, Citizen Soldier Support Program, North Carolina Department of Corrections, Substance Abuse Advisory Board, and many others. And whereas Robert Selden Goodell was a man of strong faith, lived each day of his life to the fullest, had an infectious smile and laugh, and reminded us all to embrace our wild imperfections, to be joyous and to be free. He marked 52 years of sobriety and shared his story of addiction and recovery in the book Second Chances by Gary Stromberg. And whereas Robert Selden Goodell joined the Kiwanis Club of Raleigh, North Carolina in 2014 and was an active, dependable, and valued member for many years. He was a dedicated volunteer at the Shepherd's Table Soup Kitchen and received the Walter Zella Fellowship Award. And whereas Robert Selden Goodell was survived by his children, Rebecca Beardsley, Jennifer Beardsley, Amy Goodell Johnson, and husband Richard, Robert Goodell and wife Stephanie, Elizabeth Rushing and her husband Mike, and Susan Brooks and husband Dave, 12 grandchildren, and several great-grandchildren. And whereas Robert Selden Goodell was a loving family man who opened his heart and offered sound advice and counsel to his friends, to his family, and to the members of the Kiwanis Club of Raleigh, North Carolina, who recognize him as a suitable role model for any citizen who seeks to make a positive impression among his or her family and to leave the community a better place than he or she found it. And whereas the Kiwanis Club of Raleigh, North Carolina desires to recognize, honor, and emulate the life of Robert Selden Goodell and the quality of the relationships he built. And therefore be it resolved that the Kiwanis Club of Raleigh, North Carolina hereby memorializes the life of loyal member Robert Selden Goodell, celebrates his career, and commends to all a life well lived and a demonstrated dedication to his family, to his friends, to his church, and to his community. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be spread upon the minutes of the Kiwanis Club of Raleigh, North Carolina, and be it finally resolved that a copy of this resolution be provided to his family as an expression of the affection and respect that the Kiwanis Club of Raleigh, North Carolina, for its member Robert Selden Goodell, adopted unanimously by its membership on the 25th day of April 2025.
Well, we hope it'll be adopted.
We do. We do.
Is there a motion to accept? Second. All in favor, say aye. Let us take a quiet moment to offer our prayers. We're adjourned.